Okay, so welcome to English 494, Dystopian Games, Comics, and Media. I'm Professor Rustworm. The mic is not working. I'll try to fix it. I don't know. It's better that this isn't working than something else not working. But I think we're not a big enough classroom that you can't hear me. But I am recording not the class session, just the screen over there because, it's a shopping period. And I cannot stand that question of what did I miss? You get that first 2 or 3 weeks of classes. People are shifting around. People don't usually shift around a lot in this class, but just in case, there will be people who've already emailed me who are not here today, who will be here next week, and I find it maddeningly boring to go over the syllabus for the next 10 students who are going to come to class. So I'm recording just this one screen so that at least those students who are not here can see the slides. And then all of you are also ostensibly still deciding if this is the right course for you. And this is the time to make that decision. You want to try to make that decision early because it is a class that tends to get a lot of people who want to take it. So if you want to drop it, just let me know, drop it, and more people will sort of filter in. I think it's currently full, maybe a little bit oversubscribed. But by the end of the second week, I really like to know who's going to be in the class because of the format, the special format for this class. It's really important that the teams are constituted, and I'll say more about that, the whole team thing, in a second. So hopefully you had a chance to start looking at the syllabus, but I'm going to go through it anyhow. As you may have noticed, I'm not going to read this long description for the class, but you see the course description there. Well, basically the theme for the course is dystopias and different kinds of dystopias across culture. So we're looking at games, we're looking at comics, and we're looking at media. But I will say other new media. I will say that this is mostly a class about video games. We are doing comics for the first 2 to 3 weeks, maybe until week 4. We're looking at The Walking Dead and V for Vendetta, but that's it. So if you're really kind of an avid comic book reader and you came to this class because you want to study comics, this is not really that class. We're using those stories as a frame for getting at some dystopian theories. Because I think they come across more clearly when we're looking at that format than jumping right into games. But most of the class is going to sort of be about the technical language of analyzing games. Now, obviously not making games as you would in a computer science class or maybe an our studio art class of some sort, but more looking at games as cultural documents, right? And most of you are English majors, as this is an IE class also, so it has that double designation of seminar, special topic seminar, but it's also an IE class. So if you're here because you need the IE credit, well then I guess you're in the right place, but that's the focus. So we'll go through a little bit of the content and the format. There's sort of a lot to say about it, and you'll see in a second why it makes sense that I wouldn't want to say this stuff again to anybody else next week. Because it's pretty detailed, and I'm going to have to take breaks. Okay, so I don't know, I'm starting with additional expectations. Let's see what they say. Yeah, so as I just said, we're looking at comics as a starting place, but the class is not really about comics. We'll start there for the first couple of weeks. There is the expectation that you print out the articles, in case I don't say that at another point in time. Please print out the articles. Their books for this class are at Amherst Books. They are V for Vendetta and then the beginning of the Walking Dead comic series. Only the first 3 trades, so you might actually have the Walking Dead or be able to purchase that in some other format. That is totally fine. But whatever you do, bring those to class as we're reading and discussing them. But also each week print out the readings. Right? I didn't prepare a reader where you have to pay to get all of the readings together in one set. So you'll have to do it on your own, either print at home or print in the library, something. Those are just part of the cost for the class, so you want to factor that in when you're deciding if you want to take the class. But I do expect you to have hard copies of the readings. As you see, we have laptops here, and we will be using them pretty frequently, but we're not using them for reading things on the screen. So I just can't reiterate that enough, that we expect you to have your own copy of the readings as we'll be using them. And you want to bring them to each class. If you put them in a notebook or whatever, bring them. And you want to bring them for a couple of weeks because sometimes we'll go backwards. So you want to make sure you have the handouts, which will all be on Moodle, by the way. It is also expected that if you take this class, you will find a way to buy, borrow, or rent the games. I'll say more about the games and how that format is going to work. But whatever game your team ends up working on, you are expected to play the game. So that even if you don't have a PC or a PlayStation or an Xbox, we're probably not going to be using the Wii in any way. Stranger things have happened. It might happen. I don't know. But whatever device, whatever platform the game that your team works on is on, you individually are expected to play it, right? So I'll say more about that as time goes on. But even if you don't have those systems, you have to sort of finagle away. And hopefully people in your team, when I form the teams, I form them with this in mind, trying to make sure we have enough opportunities for people within that team to actually have access to those games. But there is the expectation that you will play the game. So if you're adverse to that, then you're definitely in the wrong place. And really, my feelings won't be hurt if you left now, because it's a long class, 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that. So that is a big expectation, right? That you find a way to play the games and commit to playing the whole game at least once. That is important, also, right? We're purists here. If you choose a game and it's 80 hours, 90 hours, 60 hours, 35 hours, 10 hours, you individually are committed to playing the whole game, also. Right? And again, people come in with varying degrees of skills. I would say skills with a Z, just to emphasize the whole eye-hand coordination thing. I mean, I understand, right? I've taught this class a number of times. I think this is my 5th time teaching this class. And so people come in with a variety of different abilities in that regard. Even if you don't play games and you're sort of curious and willing to stumble through, that's what we expect you to do, right? Not necessarily not play it because it's hard or it's long. It's going to be just like watching a film or reading a book, only it may take longer. Let's see. And then, of course, sort of inherent in that is to commit to studying and producing culture because we'll be making digital projects. So I'll say a lot about that. But that's what we're here for if you are interested in the class. So is there anything else to say about these particular things? The syllabus, Moodle, course blog. Yes, well, syllabus will be on Moodle. Moodle should be, the Moodle page for the class should be visible. I just made it visible before class. If you were looking earlier, it probably wasn't. The Moodle page should be visible now. And again, all the handouts will be there. Any other related material, a lot of videos, walkthroughs, wiki. Moodle is basically our main portal for this class. But the course blog will be the sort of secondary place, which is basically going to be the depository for the things that you create. So a lot of the assignments that you do individually, you will post to the course blog, and that's actually how I will read them. I won't look at them on Moodle. You won't email them to me or anything like that. You'll turn them in on the course blog. So as we go along, I'll say more about that, and I'll give you the URL for the course blog, as well as make you all authors of it, so you can upload your stuff. It's pretty straightforward. If you've ever done it's a WordPress format, or if you have a personal blog at UMass, you're familiar enough with it. It's pretty easy. Or what's the other one? Blogspot. I don't know. Does anyone use Blogspot anymore? See, I was gonna say it's becoming like the MySpace of blogs. Maybe not. Not that there's anything wrong with MySpace either. But anyhow, WordPress, Blogspot. If you're familiar with those formats, then you'll be fine with the course blog. About this classroom, has anyone taken a TBL class before?
Hey, what?
One person? You've wanted to?
What did you say?
I said, has anybody taken a TBL class before?
Team-based learning.
Team-based learning.
Once. Very early.
Team-based learning class. So basically, have you been in these classrooms before for your classes? That is the other way of saying this. One person only. Yes? There's no. Yes, 2 people.
Yes, because you said TBL.
TBL, yes. I'm going to be using that abbreviation, TBL, but it stands for team-based learning, and we're going to be talking about it. So everybody else is new to it, and so I'll say a lot about it because you obviously not experienced with it, right?
Sorry, my teacher never liked using the abbreviation.
Oh, just always say team-based learning?
Yes.
Team-based learning. Yeah, I won't do that. I'll say TBL. I'll say TBL. I'll say teams. I won't say groups because that's like a dirty word in the TBL life. Anyhow, so about this classroom then, since other people have not been in classrooms like these, they're nice, right? Better than Bartlett, English majors?
Yes.
Which is leaving us. I mean, that's a whole side story. We'll talk about that because it's IE class. We get to talk about things like that. The destruction of Bartlett will be a topic, I can guarantee, at some point in this class. But better than Bartlett. Yes, dystopias. We got it already. So the class is over. Better than Bartlett. So there's a lot to say about this class, but I would say I've been teaching in these kinds of classrooms since they opened a few years ago, and I taught this class. Was a class designed specifically for TBL, so it was a class that I've taught always in this environment. Obviously, for us, we'll be playing video games and discussing them. The stations that you're at, the tables that you're at, are equipped to hook up consoles. So that was one of the things that I requested when we were building the rooms, that we'd be able to bring our consoles in and make that pretty easy. So I've done that here. We will do that. Every table, every team will display or model whatever game you choose. You'll play it in class, and we will hook them up through the HDMI ports. So no AV ports or the AVI ports on the back of your console, the component cords. None of the component cords. Those of you who have these machines know what I'm talking about. But we hook them up through the HDMI ports. So that's unique, right? But also the other things that are different about this classroom, we have the laptops here. There are 3 at each table. Are there 3 or 4? There's 3. Yeah, there are 3 at each table. And that is because we're doing a lot of hands-on things in the classroom. You all will be leading the classroom most of the time. As much as I like to talk, and you probably tell I like to talk, and I talk pretty fast. People say all the time, just by nature. I will talk less in this class than I have in any other class, believe it or not, because you all will be doing a lot of the work, right? You'll be displaying things, you'll be making kind of claims and arguments, introducing things to your classmates, the other teams, and so you'll use the laptops to do that. You can also bring in your own laptop, so if you have a Mac, you can switch the dongle out and plug yours in here. If you have a PC, you can do the same thing. One important thing, this is a Mac native room, and so we will not be switching these laptops, though they can dual boot. We will not be switching them over to the PC side. Do not do that. It takes hours. I barely exaggerate when I say that, for the computer to reboot, and then they have to do it again, and it's annoying. So there's some classrooms that are Mac native, and there's some classrooms that are PC native, and this is obviously the Mac one, so we're going to leave it in the OS system, right, the OS world. But as I say, if you have a PC and your laptop, you're welcome to bring that to class, but you would have it on the table next to these other ones. And for the most part, not disturb that, right? Unless you were going to display something to the class, and you could switch it out. But though we have laptops at the tables, we're supposed to use them responsibly. So that means, when I'm walking around, I'll walk around a lot. I'm only standing here right now because of this, because I want the camera to pick up my voice since the microphone's not on. No using the laptops inappropriately. You know what inappropriate means. eBay and Gmail and stuff like that. People don't do that, surprisingly. I think a lot of people who are unfamiliar with these rooms think that, oh my gosh, it must be so distracting. People have laptops and they're sitting next to each other. How does that function? It's actually great. I think that people love being able to look things up, show things. All of these tables control, everything can be projected from these tables to these monitors. So across the room, throughout the room, and it alternates also. So for example, 2 of your tables could show images, and we can alternate them on the different screens. There's all kinds of neat stuff that you could do with this. So I think that people tend to not use the laptops inappropriately because they're just so happy about how nice these classrooms are that they want to use them appropriately. So it hasn't been my experience that there's a distraction issue. And especially in this class, come on, it's about games and comics and stuff. People are pretty motivated. But I just need to say that. Use the equipment appropriately. Also, this room costs a lot of money, like over $700,000. So there is no food or drinks are allowed. There are all these signs and mean little signs that tell you that. And we're on camera, we're being monitored, so don't do it, because they'll complain to me about it. And then, even when we have the end of the year party, we have to have it like in the hallway. They actually get mad about that too. But that's better than bringing it in here. I know we're at nighttime and it's dinner. I don't know if people ate before, but you got to feel yourself. You have to prepare yourself for this. This block of time from 5:15 to 7:45 is some serious stuff. This is dinner time. You're at the end of a long day. There are no windows in here. We don't know what's going on in the outside world. It could be snowing already. You got to prepare yourself for that. So you need to fuel up. You need to have food, but not in here. We will take breaks, but I'm very bad about giving breaks. So we'll take them, but I can't promise you when they'll happen. Usually when people start squirming and stuff, then we take a break. But just have some resources. Eat beforehand, have plans after, take a nap before class, just because it's a weird time slot, right, for a lot of us, this 5 to 7. But part of the reason that we're at this time is because it's going to get harder and harder to get these rooms. So we can't be in the middle of the day. As you see, our class is not big enough to actually fill this whole space, so it's a little tricky about when they schedule us. So this is our slot. Still better than Bartlett. Yeah, I think that's it about that slide. Just those are all the random things that you should know. Okay, so the other things, course objectives. What are they? I'll say them quickly. It's important to kind of get these things out there early on. The first thing that we're going to do is come to a shared, if contested, working knowledge of the term dystopian. Right? What are dystopias? What does dystopian mean? We're going to read a lot of people basically who tell us what they think it means, and then you guys are going to decide what that term means and apply it to different aspects of culture. We're also going to explore and understand a variety of theoretical and critical perspectives on culture and digital media. So this will be outside of those discussions about dystopias. We will talk about other aspects of mostly postmodern theory, which can be a little dense and difficult. Sometimes psychoanalytic theory, we'll talk about that too. But again, our purpose is to be able to apply these things and understand these things in the context of new media, specifically games, right? A little bit with the comics, but specifically games. So then we're going to learn different ways to critically study and research digital games, comics, and other media. And about games, we're going to focus in a more formalistic mode, where we talk about games, not just sort of our own experiences with that, but actually use a sort of technical, mechanical language as we talk about how games work and function. And there's only a slice of that. This isn't an intro to the study of video games, which is a class I will teach in the future. Most of you are graduating soon enough that you probably won't take that. But we will have a sort of more formalistic approach to talking about games when we get there. Again, we'll also design and produce creative digital projects. I can't say this often enough. These will take a long time. They will take a long time. It will take a lot of energy and time for you to produce those projects. So if this is a semester where you're slammed because you have like 6 classes, and some of you people do this, you take 6 classes because you have to, but this is not the class for you if you have 6 classes or 5 classes or whatever. If you're especially stressed this semester, really consider this class because you won't do well. People in your team will hate you. I will have to give you a bad grade in a class on video games if you can't devote the time that is going to be required to produce the digital projects and do all of your individual work too, right? There's a balance of things that you have to do, but I would say it's a lot. It's a 4-credit class, it's an IE class, it's a high-demand class, it's a lot of work. So if it's this semester where you're packed, you're crammed, you got stuff to do, you're going to miss some classes, this is definitely not the class for you. The final thing that we're going to do, final course objective there is experiment with team-based learning models, strategies, and collaborative exercises. So again, this is a team-based class. I'll say more in the next few slides about what that means, and we'll be talking about that all the time. But you're working with other people, basically. You're working with other people the whole time. And if you hate that, I wouldn't say the class is not for you, but you have to be willing to change that perception or work with it somehow. All right, let's watch the video. A little bit of a video. This is James Gee talking about video games.
Any person who has any standard skills or standardized skills, they can be taught anywhere in the world now, and they can be done a lot more cheaply in low-cost centers. And so people are going to, if they're going to survive in a developed country outside of low-level service work, they're going to have innovation and creativity. And so the form of schooling that we engage in that basically privileges people who know a lot of facts but can't solve problems with them is on its last legs. It will not be economically prosperous form of schooling for us.
What's next?
Next will be schooling that stresses the ability to solve problems, but not just to solve problems, but to be able to do it collaboratively, so that you could work in a group where the group is smarter than the smartest person in the group, and also where you can innovate with the tools you've learned and not just do standard solutions to problems. That's where we're going to go, and that's one of the reasons people are interested in video games and related technologies, because again, they put you into worlds where you have to solve problems. I mean, all a video game is problem solving. It's just a series of, if you think about it, in some weird way, a video game is just an assessment. All you do is get assessed every moment as you try to solve a problem, and if you don't solve it, the game says you failed, try again, and then you solve it, and then you have a boss, which is a test, and you pass the test. I mean, games essentially are a form of assessment, the thing that is probably the most painful, ludicrous part of schooling, but in a game, it's a lot of fun, right, because it's handled in a very different way. One thing games don't really do is separate learning and assessment. They don't say, learn some stuff and then later we'll take a test. They're giving you feedback all the time about the learning curve that you're on. So they're not the only solution to this problem by any means, but they're part of the solution of getting kids in school to learn not just knowledge as facts, but knowledge as something you produce. And in the modern world, you produce collaboratively. One of the first games I played was a great game called Deus Ex. Very complicated game, and like any good baby boomer, I read the game manual. And the game manual is just as technical as a textbook, and I couldn't understand a word of it. It was boring, it was technical, it had lots of definitions that were cross-referenced other definitions, and I threw it away and said, I don't know, I can't play this game, I can't understand a word of this. And then I decided to do what any kid would have done, is I played the game, right? And after I didn't play it well, but after a few hours, I picked up that little book, that little manual, and everything in it was completely clear. Why? Because I had seen the reference to every word in it. I had seen what it was referring to. I was seeing what it was about. Well, my argument is the same with your chemistry textbook. The words in a chemistry textbook are tied to a game, the game of chemistry. What chemists do when they want to solve a problem. The words are tools.
Okay. So, for a moment, let's reflect on what James Key was saying about video games. He was talking about a couple different things, actually, and I'm going to go back to the beginning of what he was saying. But what else did you guys take from that little snippet of an interview, right? An interview, again, he writes on games, mostly in the field of education. I know some of you are majors or minors in education also, so he writes about games in that context. But what did you guys take from hearing him say a little bit about why games are interesting to him, basically, or why they're important? Yes, what's your name?
Ellis.
Ellis.
As he was saying, they're a constant feedback engine, in a sense. They keep making sure that you get to see what you can and cannot do within the bounds of the system that you're using.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. You can't jump off the screen. You can't do this. You start to learn the language of the world, the rules of the game, right, as you go along.
And it tests you. On a small note, it's actually a progressive test because the games constantly challenge you to do more and more within their limitations. And sometimes they challenge you to break those limitations in creative ways, where at the same time you don't break the game itself.
Right, absolutely. All right, so let's hear more thoughts about either what responses to what Ellis is saying, or just going back to what Guy talked about there. What's useful about these formats, right? And how does it? You might start thinking about this because this is an IE class. We're going to say this a lot. The real world, right? I don't know what that is because I'm an academic. I don't live in the real world. They tell me that all the time. But how can you apply, what concepts can we get from what Ellis is saying and what James Key was saying that apply outside of the game too, right, outside of the text? Yes,
If you put a strong emphasis on just like working in groups, because like in any real world job, like you have coworkers, like you have people who you interact with on like a daily basis. So being able to like work collaboratively to make something that is greater than the sum of its parts.
Oh, you mean like in the production of games?
Or just like in general, like in any sort of thing you do. Like if you can get a team to work together well, they can be greater than any individual.
Yeah, what's your name?
Tobias.
Tobias, okay. Yeah, so Tobias is emphasizing the collaborative part of what Guy was saying, but also of gaming, right? Which, I don't know in popular culture if gaming is thought of as a primarily social activity or a collaborative activity, but certainly those dimensions are there, right? You don't have to work very hard to make that argument. And it works as a metaphor, as a parable for collaboration in other contexts, right? Games can work that way. At least that's how Guy wants to see it, right? But we don't always have to agree with him either, right? There might have been things there that he was saying that were annoying or troubling, or you reacted to in some other way. So you don't necessarily have to affirm. I'm just asking for your honest thoughts about the start of that conversation, right? That opening thread, yeah.
I was particularly interested in what you were saying about how you can't like really just kind of read a text and then immediately be able to do or understand it. So in order to understand the text, you actually have to have like a kind of like actual experience with what it's dealing with, whether it's the chemistry or actually playing the game. Like you could read about playing tennis, but until you play tennis, you don't actually know how to play it.
Yes. Heuristics, right? But experience, right? The experience component of that is emphasized. John.
And the difference between going off of that, he said that he just implied that he tried reading, it didn't work, then he tried playing, and he got to a certain point where it didn't work, so then he went back to the reading.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of just like switching it on and off between experience and then getting it explained to you is the way that it works better, rather than just a dump of being explained and then hopefully you get the experience.
Yeah, the combination of those two things, right? To be able to relay and go back and forth between sort of reading and synthesizing material, which we're going to do a lot because there's a lot of reading for this class, but also the pragmatic side of it too, right? To switch gears. He's talking about Deus Ex. He's talking about game manuals at a certain point, right? Game manuals in like the 80s, or certain game manuals. Because game manuals say like Civilization, that series, they're still pretty substantial documents, right? Like they're notorious for having a huge manual and a very helpful manual. But console manuals these days are not like that at all, right? They're like 2 pages. And they're completely, it's non-existent, right? It's like turn on the machine and press A to start. It's pretty much all you get. But he's talking about sort of an earlier era of gaming and game manuals and the purpose that they served. One more thought about what Guy was saying. Obviously, it's going to lead into talking a little bit more about team-based learning. Well, the main thing it leads us to talk about, or to connect to team-based learning, is exactly what he's saying about the collaboration part. I believe that these classrooms, that one of the reasons, I won't say why, I don't know all the reasons, but one of the reasons these classrooms were constructed were because a lot of UMass grads were saying in their sort of exit surveys, which the IE experience is supposed to be like anyway, for those of you who are almost exiting, I mean there's a lot of seniors, but some of you are juniors too, near exit, a lot of UMass students were saying, and former students were saying, they wish they had more opportunities for collaboration, right? That college is actually a very social experience, of course, but in the classroom, and then their experiences on campus in the classroom didn't compare as much or prepare them as much for the kinds of collaborative work that they would have to do like in an office setting, in a variety of different kinds of jobs. And so one of the reasons I think these classrooms were constructed was based on that idea, right? That we can shift in some classes and in some circumstances from a lecture or discussion model, like those are the 2 main models, especially in the humanities. I can't speak for what they do in the sciences because I don't know. I'm not over there. I don't know what those classrooms are like. But in the humanities, most of our formats are lecture or discussion, right? Or sometimes a combination of both. But even that is not really a collaborative experience for the most part. Even when you have group work, because the group work is the bane of our existence, right? Group work is totally not fun. And even those, a lot of discussion classes have it. And for the most part, students don't like it. You do a little bit, presentation together, you do a little project. One person does all the work. 2 of the other people never show up. Like there's all this dysfunction, and it's not really collaboration. It's not an ongoing thing, right? It's not something where you have to rely on each other. You have to get to know these strangers. You have to work together. So in this class, the team-based learning model, and there are a variety of different ways to do team-based learning, but the way I do it is we create teams, you stay in them the entire semester. So you will get to work with these people the whole time. Whether you like each other or not, it doesn't matter. You will be a part of a team. And you will have to solve problems together. So there are quizzes that you'll do together, and there are quizzes and tests. They actually call them something else in the team-based world, but I don't use that acronym. But we'll just use them as quizzes. You'll do them individually. You do them as a team, and you'll see that, obviously, usually you do a lot better as a team than you did as an individual. Even the best individual at your table, who always does the reading, who's always on time, that person will not usually score as high as the team score. So we'll do that. We'll have a chance to test that out a couple of times throughout the semester. But mainly, the project that we're working on, and these team-based classes are for all different disciplines. There are not a lot of humanities classes, English, history. English has one, my classes. Well, actually, I'm doing 2 team-based classes this semester. So we have 2. History has a couple. But a lot of the other classes are like physics, some of the social sciences have them as well. And they work on different kinds of projects, but our project in this classroom will be the creation of a video game walkthrough. That's one of the things that you're going to create, right? As a team, you're going to create a different kinds of walkthroughs. We'll call it the critical walkthrough that you guys will create. But you'll do other projects, other mini projects together throughout the semester. Individually, you will also do work, but a lot of this experience will be working as a team, as if you were, I guess, in the real world. But this is the real world also. And games are also the real world, right? It's so confusing. I don't know why people like that phrase, the real world. It doesn't make any sense to me. Anyhow, that's what we will do. We will distinguish between what teams are and what groups are. There's a handout on it. I don't think I printed it up. I might put it on Moodle for you to look at, thinking about groups versus teams. Basically, groups don't work, right? They don't usually work because people don't buy into it. They're not invested in it. Teams typically do, and the way we structure this class, and I think the reason it's been widely successful for the most part, especially this class. I had one team-based class on Black popular culture that did not work as well, but every time I taught this class, it works well, and I think I understand why. But it has to do with the grading. So we'll talk about grading because everybody cares about grades, right? I think they do. But the way you grade and the way I grade and the way you assess each other, I think makes it a lot different from a group. Because at intervals throughout the semester, you will give me feedback about how you're performing in your team. We won't use group, right? And how the other members of your team are performing. So it's all it's not anonymous, but your teammates won't know exactly what you're saying. But you have all this time to troubleshoot. You have all these opportunities to give feedback, and people usually start to self-correct, right? And also, the way I design the teams tends to influence how well they work. And I don't mean that. I don't know if I should say it that way, because people are often mad about the teams that they end up being in. But the way I design the teams is usually based on your skill sets, what you can bring to the table, so that each team has a balance of people who are familiar with a variety of different things. Does that make sense? So that you're able to share your collective, talents and skills, again, to complete the tasks, to complete the projects that you do throughout the term. So those are some of the ways that teams are different than groups have been in the past, right? And so we'll keep talking as we go forward about that. But again, if none of this appeals to you, then again, you don't have to stay because we're already an hour in. But if you kind of like these ideas or are curious about them, this is where we're headed. We're headed down that road of lots of collaboration, but also some individual stuff. A big part of the team life in this class is the teams on call, and you'll see this in the syllabus as the weeks go on. It always says team on call. Once you guys give yourself names, because the teams name themselves, I'll fill that in on the syllabus, and I'll just probably make a chart of who's on call when, and so you'll know when it's coming up. But basically, each team will be on call 3 times, and being on call means that you will basically lead us through the readings. Right, talk about the key concepts from the reading. You'll make slides. We usually use the Google software, the Google suite of things, Google Drive and Google Spreadsheet and all that stuff. I'm not a big fan of it. There's other ways to do that too. But collaborative, but it's a good way to do it for collaboration because you can all have a Gmail account that's for the team and then log in or share the file and edit those things. But anyhow, you will present stuff. You will, when you're on call, you'll ask questions of the rest of the class, and not boring questions, because come on, it's late, we're going to be hungry and tired. Exciting things, right? Your teams will think about preparing about 30 minutes worth of material, and then the rest of the class will be spent doing a variety of other tactics. But when your team is on call, that just means that you guys are responsible for a good chunk of the seminar. At least 30 minutes, right? Not an hour. Some teams get carried away and they do a whole bunch of stuff. I like that, I like that enthusiasm. But we have a lot to do usually each class. But you'll lead us through the readings, and then sometimes on those class days we'll also have those quizzes. So that takes up some time too, right? You do the individual quiz, you do the team quiz. But teams on call, you're responsible for the work that week. And I guess soon, when the teams are constituted next week, we will start signing up those teams. Your teams will sign up for which times they're going to be on call. Eventually, when we do the games draft, which I'll say more about in a second, your team will present on the game that you're working on. Is there other stuff? There was some stuff about reading on that slide. Basically, go back. Let's see. The only thing I was going to say about the readings here is that there's a lot, and sometimes they're dense, especially in the beginning. All the theories, all the stuff that we're reading on dystopia, it's a lot of reading, and it'll take a while to do. Sometimes I will let you do some of the reading in class if there's time, and work together to kind of try to understand it, because some of the stuff is really complicated and dense anyhow. So sometimes we'll break off and you'll work on it in class. So that's another feature of the team-based stuff, is that you do stuff outside, you do your reading outside, but you also can do some of that in the classroom. It's not just about, it's more of a flipped kind of class environment. And remember, the teams are presenting on that stuff, but you want to take notes, right? Because you're going to need that information for the quizzes, for the those little exams. So you want to be able to skim some of the content for the main ideas, especially the readings on the utopias. Because the first 2 weeks after this, the next 2 weeks after this, those readings are long and they're very dense, but I still want you to know the main concepts of each theory. Each take on what a dystopia is, I want you to be able to know basically what they are, to have that down. And that's going to take some time, both in class and outside of class. So the point about that was to try to skim some of it. But if you're on call, you're going to be responsible for sort of leading us through that and refreshing our memory. I think my battery is going to run out on this thing. Oh, we got time. All right, the games draft. So what about the games, right? We said all this other stuff. There's so much content. It's a long syllabus. The games draft. The first time I taught this class, I think I assigned the games, and that was successful. I mean, it was a good experience. But ever since then, what I've done is I've allowed the teams to pick their games, and from a bigger and bigger pool. There's a lot of dystopian games out there, right? So one of the things is the game must be compatible with your research area. There's 4 research areas this year, so there's only 4 teams. So there'll be 4 tables. And one topic is race and representation. Another topic is gender and representation. The third is games and social media. And the fourth is machinima. Which, if you don't know what machinima is, you'll know by the end of the class. It doesn't matter. You'll get to know as time goes on, right? Basically, what will happen is we'll have a draft, which is basically a lottery. You pick numbers randomly. And then whoever gets number 1 will be able to pick their research area first. Once you pick the research area, you will pick your game. And the game will come from this pool of games. On the syllabus, I made a list of some sample topic or some sample games. I'll probably change that a little, but yeah, I made a list of some sample games. The main thing about that draft is that you have to decide which games are going to suit your team. That's the very first team task, or one of the first team tasks is you can't have someone at the table. How many of you identify as gamers in some way or another? You play games, you like them, comfortable. Okay, so we always have a fair amount of people that identify as that. But we have people who don't identify as that, right? They're not gamers. They don't want to play Skyrim. They're scared that they're not going to finish it. They're not going to finish Fallout. And even if you played those games before, I can't emphasize enough, you have to play it again. If you played it, it was your favorite game ever, and you happen to choose that game, I still want you to play it again now. And your gamer journals, should be current about your current playthrough of this. So don't pick a game that you love but don't really want to play again, or don't have, or whatever. Don't do those things. But the first task as a team will be to pick a game that accommodates everyone's style and interests and accessibility. So you can't just say, hey, I want to play, Fallout, or I want to play Left 4 Dead, or I want to play this. You have to negotiate with your team which game you really want to choose, right? And it should be a full, collaborative, empathetic, so you can't teach empathy in online classes, right? Empathetic discussion about what will suit the people in a given team. So those are some possible games, right? Skyrim, Walking Dead, Heavy Rain, Mass Effect, any of them. I'm going to make a list, like a master list of possible dystopian games. They basically have to be games that I'm familiar enough with, that I've either played, not that I like or anything, but just that I'm familiar enough with. I've played, or in most cases have finished. This is a pretty big list, because I've taught this class a lot. Each year I play a couple of different games that fall under this rubric. So that will be the list. That will be the universe that you can pull from. But the main thing is that it'll also have to fit your research topic. So you can't choose a game that your team cannot imagine talking about gender with, for example, right? Or race, if that's your topic. Or social media, games as social media, right? Which actually gives you a lot of room. That's a harder territory to figure out. But I'll say more about that as we get closer to the draft, which will happen in week 3. By week 3, everything is sort of finalized. Your teams are finalized. Your teams are going to be constituted by next week, but your draft, all this stuff happens in the 3rd week. Because we got to get going on that, right? Some of these people pick crazy games that are like 90 hours, and you've got to pick that. We got to know that early on. I had a team that picked Fallout 3 one year, and I mean, they all played it. They all finished the game. Pretty long game. They didn't do all the side missions, but even to do the main story of that game took a pretty good amount of time. I always have teams that pick GTA, and it means finishing the main mission of GTA. It doesn't mean just driving around and killing people or whatever. It means finishing the game. And if you have new gamers at your table, on your team, that may not be possible. So you might have to choose something else, like The Walking Dead, right? Which is really a more generous game for people to play who don't play games. Also, platform, again. So Steam is another option. People who have laptops or computers or access to them can get a lot of these things on Steam. So you want to make sure, is it available on that platform? Do we have enough Xboxes or PlayStations at our table? All of those factors are going to determine which games you choose, which is why every year I try to make the list bigger and bigger. So you have more opportunities to pick a game that everybody can work with, right? And again, the class is not about playing and studying the game you love, because that is not a team attitude. See, we already have that, right? We understand that. Playing and studying the game you love may not happen in this class, but playing a game that you can all do research on and talk about, that makes a better choice. Are there any questions at this point? I'm just kind of firing through this. Yes?
Is it all right to go cross-platform if one person has a PC and another person has an Xbox?
Absolutely, yes. So the games that I put on the master list, I'm trying to choose games that are on multiple platforms for that reason. So if one person's playing on their laptop and another person has on an Xbox or even a handheld, that would be great, Something's on the Vita or the DS. I don't know about that. But something, right? Yeah, cross-platforms, definitely fine. I had some of these games were there. But it has to be the same story. It has to be the same version of the game, right? It can't be a port or spin-off or something like that. Like the iPad versions are often not the full games. Yeah.
That's my second question. For ones with customizable avatars like Mass Effect 3 or Skyrim, if you can change your character's identity or things like that, that counts as the same game.
That's the same game, yeah. Arguably not the same experience, but it's the same game, right? Same story, same missions, etc. You can't just choose a game and somebody else plays the mini version on the iPad that's like 2 hours long and you just swipe stuff and you don't really do anything else. You can't. That's not the same game. Any other questions? Yes.
Can we suggest other potential?
Yes,
games?
you can make a case because there are games that I may not have on the list, right? There may be games that I haven't thought enough about. I'm not as aware of, but will be willing to play and think about more. So yeah, you can make a case. If there are games that come to your team's attention that you would like to lobby for, you can. Now remember, your draft order also determines what game you'll get. So there might be a game that you really want, but somebody else might draft it first. Because it's a snake draft, so if you get the first research area, you get the last choice of the games. There are only 4 teams though, so you got a good chance. I don't know what the odds are. But any other questions? Yes.
Do you mind, on top of the individual playthroughs, any collaborative playthroughs?
Yes, those are encouraged, right? Absolutely encouraged. So sometimes that happens where somebody is just not going to finish the game, or they don't have it, and they're at somebody's house. You play together, and then I've had people do some of the assignments together too, some really interesting collaborative gamer journals. You both have to do your own individual work, but they've done collaborative versions of the gamer journal. Or talked about it in some way. So playing the games with the people in your team is definitely encouraged. That's optimal experience. Other questions? Were there any? Yes.
Have you played Dishonored?
I have not played Dishonored, but
Alright,
I
that was,
wouldn't be
like, the one
opposed
I
to
was
it.
gonna
I wouldn't be
wanna
opposed to
record.
playing it.
So it's like a dystopian steampunk Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, I know it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be opposed to it if a team really wants to play it. I won't say yes to a whole bunch of games though that I can't realistically play in this time frame. But that might be one of them. If people are, again, feel strongly about that. And in the next 2 weeks, that'll be the time to start making, before week 3, obviously, next class will be the time to start thinking about that. So I'll try to give you guys some time at the next class, when you are in your teams, you're not in your teams yet, to start talking about these things and make a case for which games you want to see on the list. And we still don't even know what dystopia is yet, right? We kind of know because, it's a common term. But we don't know from a theoretical standpoint. So once you do that, you might also have some other ideas. We haven't even gone an hour yet. So we got time. Let's watch another video. This is Jane McGonigal. And we're only going to play part of her TED Talk talking about games. She wrote the book Why Games Matter, which we're not reading, but she's going to tell you about it anyway.
I'm Jane McGonigal. I'm a game designer. I've been making games online now for 10 years, and my goal for the next decade is to try to make it as easy to save the world in real life as it is to save the world in online games. Now, I have a plan for this, and it entails convincing more people, including all of you, to spend more time playing bigger and better games. Right now, we spend 3 billion hours a week playing online games. Some of you might be thinking, that's a lot of time to spend playing games, maybe too much time, considering how many urgent problems we have to solve in the real world. But actually, according to my research at the Institute for the Future, it's actually the opposite is true. 3 billion hours a week is not nearly enough gameplay to solve the world's most urgent problems. In fact, I believe that if we want to survive the next century on this planet, we need to increase that total dramatically. I've calculated the total we need at 21 billion hours of gameplay every week. So that's probably a bit of a counterintuitive idea, so I'll say it again, let it sink in. If we want to solve problems like hunger, poverty, climate change, global conflict, obesity, I believe that we need to aspire to play games online for at least 21 billion hours a week by the end of the next decade. No, I'm serious. I am. Here's why. This picture pretty much sums up why I think games are so essential to the future survival of the human species. Truly. This is a portrait by a photographer named Phil Toledano. He wanted to capture the emotion of gaming, so he set up a camera in front of gamers while they were playing. And this is a classic gaming emotion. Now, if you're not a gamer, you might miss some of the nuance in this photo. You probably see the sense of urgency, a little bit of fear, but intense concentration, deep focus on tackling a really difficult problem. If you are a gamer, you will notice a few nuances here. The crinkle of the eyes up and around the mouth is a sign of optimism. And the eyebrows up is surprise. This is a gamer who's on the verge of something called an epic win. Now, oh, you've heard of that. Okay, good. So we have some gamers among us. So an epic win is an outcome that is so extraordinarily positive, you had no idea it was even possible until you achieved it. It was almost beyond the threshold of imagination. And when you get there, you are shocked to discover what you're truly capable of. That's an epic win. This is a gamer on the verge of an epic win. And this is the face that we need to see on millions of problem solvers all over the world as we try to tackle the obstacles of the next century. The face of someone who, against all odds, is on the verge of an epic win. Now, unfortunately, this is more of the face that we see in everyday life now as we try to tackle urgent problems. This is what I call the I'm not good at life face. And this is actually me making it. Can you see it? Yes, good. This is actually me making the I'm not good at life face. This is a piece of graffiti in my old neighborhood in Berkeley, California, where I did my PhD on why we're better in games than we are in real life. And this is a problem that a lot of gamers have. We feel that we are not as good in reality as we are in games. And I don't mean just good as in successful, although that's part of it. We do achieve more in game worlds. But I also mean good as in motivated to do something that matters, inspired to collaborate and to cooperate. And when we're in game worlds, I believe that many of us become the best version of ourselves, the most likely to help at a moment's notice, the most likely to stick with a problem as long as it takes, to get up after failure and try again. And in real life, when we face failure, when we confront obstacles, we often don't feel that way. We feel overcome, we feel overwhelmed, we feel anxious, maybe depressed, frustrated, or cynical. We never have those feelings when we're playing games. They just don't exist in games. So that's what I wanted to study when I was a graduate student. What about games makes it impossible to feel that we can't achieve everything? How can we take those feelings from games and apply them to real-world work? So I looked at games like World of Warcraft, which is really the ideal collaborative problem-solving environment. And I started to notice a few things that make epic wins so possible in online worlds. So the first thing is, whenever you show up in one of these online games, especially in World of Warcraft, there are lots and lots of different characters who are willing to trust you with a world-saving mission right away. But not just any mission. It's a mission that is perfectly matched with your current level.
I'm sitting this around, but don't fill it out now.
You can do it. They never give you a challenge that you can't achieve. But it is on the verge of what you're capable of, so you have to try hard. But there's no unemployment in World of Warcraft. There's no sitting around wringing your hands. There's always something specific and important to be done. And there are also tons of collaborators everywhere you go. Hundreds of thousands of people ready to work with you to achieve your epic mission. That's not something we have in real life like easily. The sense that at our fingertips are tons of collaborators. And also there's this epic story, this inspiring story of why we're there and what we're doing. And then we get all this positive feedback. You guys have heard of leveling up and +1 strength and +1 intelligence. We don't get that kind of constant feedback in real life. When I get off the stage, I'm not going to have, +1 speaking and +1 crazy idea, +20 crazy idea. I don't get that feedback in real life. Now, the problem with collaborative online environments like World of Warcraft is that it's so satisfying to be on the verge of an epic win all the time that we decide to spend all our time in these game worlds. It's just better than reality. So far, collectively, all the World of Warcraft gamers have spent 5.93 million years solving the virtual problems of Azeroth. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It might sound like it's a bad thing. But to put that in context, 5.93 million years ago was when our earliest primate human ancestors stood up. That was the first upright primate. Okay, so when we talk about how much time we're currently investing in playing games, the only way it makes sense to even think about it is to talk about time at the magnitude of human evolution, which is an extraordinary thing, but it's also apt because it turns out that by spending all this time playing games, we're actually changing what we are capable of as human beings. We're evolving to be a more collaborative and hardy species. This is true, I believe this. So consider this really interesting statistic. It was recently published by a researcher at Carnegie Mellon University. The average young person today in a country with a strong gamer culture will have spent 10,000 hours playing online games by the age of 21. Now 10,000 hours is a really interesting number for two reasons. First of all, for children in the United States, 10,080 hours is the exact amount of time you will spend in school from 5th grade to high school graduation if you have perfect attendance. So we have an entire parallel track of education going on where young people are learning as much about what it takes to be a good gamer as they're learning about everything else in school. Now, some of you have probably read Malcolm Gladwell's new book, Outliers. So you would have heard of his theory of success, the 10,000 hour theory of success. It's based on this great cognitive science research that if we can master 10,000 hours of effortful study at anything by the age of 21, we will be virtuosos at it. We'll be as good at whatever we do as the greatest people in the world. And so now what we're looking at is an entire generation of young people who are virtuoso gamers. So the big question is, what exactly are gamers getting so good at? Because if we could figure that out, we would have a virtually unprecedented human resource on our hands. This is how many people we now have in the world who spend at least an hour a day playing online games. These are our virtuoso gamers. 500 million people who are extraordinarily good at something. And in the next decade, we're going to have another billion gamers who are extraordinarily good at whatever that is. If you don't know it already, this is coming. The game industry is developing consoles that are low energy and that work with the wireless phone networks instead of broadband internet, so that gamers all over the world, particularly in India, China, Brazil, can get online. They expect 1 billion more gamers in the next decade. So it brings us up to 1.5 billion gamers. So I started to think about what these games are making us virtuosos at. Here are the 4 things I came up with. The first is urgent optimism. Okay, think of this as extreme self-motivation. Urgent optimism is the desire to act immediately, to tackle an obstacle, combined with the
You should
belief
write these
that we have a
down.
reasonable
These
hope
4
of
things
success.
for the next thing that we're going to do.
Gamers always believe that an epic win is possible, and that it's always worth trying, and trying now. Gamers don't sit around. Okay, gamers are virtuosos at weaving a tight social fabric. There's a lot of interesting research that shows that we like people better after we play a game with them, even if they've beaten us badly. And the reason is it takes a lot of trust to play a game with someone. We trust that they will spend their time with us, that they will play by the same rules, value the same goal, they'll stay with the game until it's over. And so playing a game together actually builds up bonds and trust and cooperation, and we actually build stronger social relationships as a result. Blissful productivity, I love it. You know, there's a reason why the average World of Warcraft gamer plays for 22 hours a week, kind of a half-time job. It's because we know when we're playing a game that we're actually happier working hard than we are relaxing or hanging out. We know that we are optimized as human beings to do hard, meaningful work. And gamers are willing to work hard all the time if they're given the right work. Finally, epic meaning. Gamers love to be attached to awe-inspiring missions, to human planetary scale stories. So just one bit of trivia that helps put that into perspective. So you all know Wikipedia, biggest wiki in the world. Second biggest wiki in the world, with nearly 80,000 articles, is the World of Warcraft wiki. 5 million people use it every month. They have compiled more information about World of Warcraft on the internet than any other topic covered on any other wiki in the world. They are building an epic story. They are building an epic knowledge resource about...
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. Now, on your whiteboards, we're going to take a break after this. It's coming. But these are your whiteboards. You have to erase this one. On your whiteboards, each of you, I want you to think about as a team, or as a table, because you're not really teams yet, but you're pseudo-teams. As a table, a little bit of McGonagall's speech, and particularly those terms, right? There's a lot of content there. There might be some reactions that you have. Talk about those things, your initial responses to that. Talk about those things in your table, at your table. But I want each of you to focus on, anecdotally especially, one of those concepts. So, can't you have a question already? No, I'm just talking to you. Wait, well, in a second you can ask a question if it's not clear yet. So I want you to first, talk about the video for a few minutes, right, at your table, what your responses are. Again, especially if there's some challenges or rebuttals to what McGonagall is saying. And then next, each of your tables is going to take one of those terms. Let's see. Urgent optimism. Over here, you guys can have that. Urgent optimism. And I want you to sort of come up with the best anecdote amongst you that applies to that. What she meant by urgent optimism, and somebody at your table has to share an experience about that. So you all have to decide what's the most interesting one, because it's late, we don't want to be bored. Yes? So collaboratively figure out who should share on urgent optimism. A brief story, not a whole life story kind of thing. Over here, social fabric, same thing. Right? Her point, what was her point about social fabric? And anecdotally, what did someone at your table have to say about that? Share it first. Blissful productivity here, and then epic meaning over here. Right? So you talk about that, and on your boards, use your boards to tell us or say something related to that. Right? Either summarize something, or let's say you guys have a rebuttal, you have a thought. The first thing you can put on your board is your table's response to what McGonagall has said, right, or a challenge or whatever. And then second, yeah, this will be evidence for the rest of the class. This is only going to be on Moodle. I mean, I'll have to put it on YouTube, but I'll private it, and it's in Moodle. So don't be shy. Making media, you're gonna be on YouTube a lot, especially in my other class. If you're in that class, it's all about YouTube.
Oh, really? Okay.
Okay, this table. John, see, it'll be great when you guys have names so that I can use names. What did you guys decide and why?
Okay, we
Table
decided
this.
on the split being 60% individual evaluation and 40% team evaluation.
60-40, why?
Mainly because we, based on our jobs with like group work, even though this is a team setting, so it's different. We didn't want the like it to be too much on the team evaluation, like a whole 45%. But then again, this is a different type of experience, a different type of learning thing, and especially when we're looking at the walkthrough project, which we feel like is the kernel of this class, we want that to be worth a lot. So
Okay.
60-40 split.
60-40. Anybody not choose 60-40? Table. So that was selective processing. Let's hear what you guys came up with. Not 60-40.
We just said 55-45. We went radical with it.
55-45. I think that is a big difference. Why did you guys choose that?
The numbers were there.
Because that's the low. That's the lowest possible amount that you could count for individual. The highest amount that you could count for team, right? 55-45. Do you want to try to persuade the rest of the class to go that way? So what's the spirit behind that part, though? Of you wanted to do the least amount, the numbers be as even as possible. I guess that's the way of thinking about it. If we did 55-45, what was the spirit of that
There wasn't a
decision?
spirit.
It was how could you dispiritedly choose that?
Well, that guy earlier, you have worries with working in a team. You worry like people are not going to do things or not show up. But in
Yeah.
this class, I really don't see that happening as much. Everyone's pretty interested.
You guys haven't recovered from your epic meeting discussion, have you? I think that was the lead of this.
I just felt that it was a good balance because the class is team-based.
Yeah.
So I felt like it was a good.
The
It
fo-
was still, it's still, I mean, the individual evaluations are still worth more. But
Yeah.
I felt like it was a good
Yeah.
thing to focus on teams too.
I mean, I do think that the 55-45 sends a stronger message than the 60-40. Even though it's only a 5%, differential in each direction, I think it does, right? Because at least you guys are not on the 70-30. I kind of said, spoiler there, where the 70-30 doesn't work. Why do you guys think it doesn't work? Because people really brush off the teamwork at that point, or they try to, but you can't, because in order to do those projects, the team paper, the walkthrough, all that stuff, those presentations, you're going to do 3 in this class because there's 4 groups instead of 5. I normally do 5. So you do 3 on-calls. That's a lot of time with the people in your team. And the reason 70-30 doesn't work is because there will be 1 or 2 people in the team that kind of have a lot going on. They might be good people, but they have a lot going on. And if it's 70-30, it's going to be harder to motivate them individually. So I think the 55-45 does send a strong message of we are all in on this. 60-40 still sends that message of we want the team stuff to count. But I think that's why I was interested in this table choosing the 55-45, because I think that's the most aggressive defense of the team model, right? Or the most, aggressive support, the most adamant support. We'll just change all those adjectives each time I say it. That really supports the team model, though the 60-40 does too. So what do you guys think, though? We didn't hear from these other 2 tables. As a class, we still have to decide for sure what the breakdowns are going to be. Do you want it 60-40? Are you persuaded by this conversation in any way to go closer to 55-45? You changed opinions, right? This is a democracy sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like because if you miss one class, that'll kill your grade. You're going to come in and participate in these team activities. So it should be 55-45.
You changed your mind.
But this raises the question
If this wasn't my group's opinion.
Oh, your group. Did you guys also choose 45-55? No. What'd you choose? 60-40. 60-40. Oh, you chose 60-40 too.
I did 55-45, but I don't know. I feel like if you do team evaluations, though, in that sense, 45%.
Yeah.
If you don't do too hard an individual evaluation, the team can actually help you succeed overall.
Right.
It gives you more leverage.
That's an interesting way of thinking about it. If you're a weaker individual, not a weaker individual, but if you have a weaker individual output, the team, but a strong team, and that does happen actually, where a team is just on fire, like their presentations are great, their final project is awesome. I'm going to show you some of those final projects as time goes on, what people have done, with their walkthroughs and these digital projects. But sometimes that does happen, where there's an individual that doesn't necessarily stand out as much in their individual contribution, but the team was great, and it is true, they always get a really good grade. I mean, people tend to get good grades in this class anyway, but that can push you into a higher grade if you plan on having subpar individual output. Yeah, that's a generous way of thinking about it. All right, so what are we gonna do? Are we gonna vote on this? You want to vote 60-40 versus the 55-45? Because that seems to be the 57-43. Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I don't even like numbers, really. I'm in the humanities.
60-40 because it's like more round.
It's clean.
Yeah,
it's even.
It's not messy.
But I am for the philosophy of things, right? I am for the meanings behind things. So I can support 45, 55, 45, or, whatever you guys decide. More thoughts, though? More discussion? Yeah.
I think also, like, at least
Let me turn this off.